In 1935, an old wooden boat was recovered from a lake in upstate New York. Her cannons were still intact. It was soon confirmed that this was the oldest American combat ship ever found, the gunboat Philadelphia. The Philadelphia fought and sank during the War of Independence. Over 200 years of U.S. naval history can be traced right back to this small gunboat. By 1776, the Revolutionary War was into its second year. The Philadelphia's mission was to defend the Champlain Valley, the American colony's northern frontier. The Continental Army feared the British would try to launch an attack from Canada. For both sides in the war, rivers and waterways were key transportation arteries.
There were very few frontier roads in those days, so using the water was the main way not only to move troops, but to move in particular their supplies. So whoever had command of the lake in that campaign was going to be dominant, and both sides knew this.
The job of defending Lake Champlain fell to American General Benedict Arnold, but he had little time and few resources.
The Americans had to build their ships from the standing timber of the forests, and that was the creation that Benedict Arnold was mostly responsible for putting together.
The Philadelphia was one of those gunboats. She boasted just one sail, but she was armed with 3 cannons, one facing forward and one each to port and starboard. Bundles of wood were strapped to the sides of the oak hull to protect the crew from enemy fire. They would need all the help they could get.
The men who made up the crews for these were not sailors. These were volunteers, these were soldiers, militiamen, maybe a few of them had sailed a boat before, most had not. This was very much an amateur hour for the American fleet.
Even Benedict Arnold admitted his men were a wretched, motley crew. On the morning of October 11th, 1776, 30 British vessels swept down from the north. Waiting for them by Valcour Island was Arnold's fleet of just 15 vessels.
The British had every advantage. They had several heavy guns, and they absolutely dominated the confrontation.
The pride of the American fleet, the Royal Savage, was run aground and then set on fire by the British. Arnold's small fleet fought bravely all day, but they were outgunned. As dusk approached, the Philadelphia was hit squarely by a 24-pound shot. She sank so quickly that when she was recovered 160 years later, one cannon still had iron shot in its muzzle, ready to fire. Soundly defeated, the 5 remaining American boats fled.
The British chased them up the lake, sinking several, and those that were not sunk were run aground and set afire.
Benedict Arnold and his fellow survivors eventually fled to rebel lines further south. But the Americans had bought themselves valuable time. The British returned north to wait out the winter in Canada. The Philadelphia's career had lasted all of 2 months, but her legacy endured much longer. On display at the Smithsonian's Museum of American History, she's a tribute to those first makeshift gunboats and their scrappy crew.